Hey everyone. So we had the massive privilege of sitting down with Miles Russell to talk more on the Dorset Iron Age. Truthfully, ever since we started planning the Hillforts series, which is going back years now, I was really hoping we could get some time with Miles and have him explain things. So I can't lie, was incredibly excited to get that chance. This is going to be a slightly different episode. After the absolute monster that was the previous, to get this cut together in anything like a reasonable time frame, rather than our usual approach where if you mention something, you cut to a clip of it, I'm going to be leaving a lot of pleasant Dorset and Hillfort footage running in the background, like this. Isn't that relaxing? And all of this is for more of a podcast-style episode. It just means I don't need another month to get this assembled. And look, if there's an antidote to the rising tide of slop and just AI nonsense and straight misinformation creeping into every corner, we've spent the last 6+ years actually going and filming these places. Not using stock libraries, actually getting out and filming the places ourselves, whether it's here in Dorset and further afield in the UK, or across Europe into Asia, Africa, and, well, it's a work in progress. We've done a lot, but there's a lot left to do. But we do need help. This platform rewards shocked-face thumbnails, rage-bait titles, and endless Stonehenge posting with hundreds of thousands of views, whereas if you don't want to do all that, just showcase some ancient places, discuss them, and, even vaguely behave like an actual adult when making history videos, you get buried. So hey, you know how this works by now. It's not complicated. Other than a playlist of all our Hillforts episodes, there's a lot more ancient history to catch on the channel, plus the obvious stuff, drop a like on this and a subscribe to catch more. But with all of that said, Dr. Miles Russell, it's amazing to have you on the channel. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I kind of know you through, formerly Twitter, now Blue Sky, as someone who likes Hillforts and mosaics and standing in hypocausts, or not necessarily in that order. But for those at home who... those at home. We're not filming this in front of a studio audience. Like, you are all those at home.
Yeah.
But could you just tell the folks who you are and what you do?
Sure. I am currently I'm Director of Fieldwork at Bournemouth University, Archaeological Fieldwork, which means that I'm in charge of the training school for the undergraduates, which is their first really experience of archaeology and archaeological excavation and recording. There's a big team of us sort of involved in that, but also we bring in members of the public as well, because often it's not possible for people to get that involved in archaeological work and get their hands dirty and discover things. So we sort of open up to the public as well. But I also lecture at Bournemouth. My sort of main areas of study are essentially prehistory, very interested in the Neolithic, but also at the very end of prehistory, in the Iron Age with the arrival of the Romans. So those are my sort of two major research areas. And I've been at Bournemouth worryingly now just over 3 decades, which seems an incredibly long time. But essentially, it's field archaeology is my sort of rationale, is my reason for being.
Oh, fantastic. And you guys have you've just wrapped up this year's season out in the field. Could you tell us a bit about that and Durotriges and that whole...
Yeah, the current training program, it's part research project and part training program. But really since 2009, we've been doing survey and fieldwork as part of the Durotriges project. And the Durotriges, of course, are the Iron Age tribe that existed in Britain at the time the Romans arrived. And so the project's essentially trying to look at what life was like before, during and after the Roman occupation, to see how did things change. What were the Durotriges like? What was their cultural footprint like? So we've been investigating a series of sites. Essentially what we wanted to do was to look at sites that weren't part of a hill fort, that weren't connected to a town, and that wasn't a villa, but as a normal rural settlement in the Iron Age. And we've been really investigating around a place called Winterbourne Kingston, which is just to the northeast of Bear Regis in central Dorset, which is a beautiful part of the world. All of Dorset's lovely, but this particularly lovely part of the world. But it's got great archaeology because it's essentially untouched, undeveloped, previously unrecorded, and it's giving us a big slice of understanding of what's happening really from the late Bronze Age, from about 1000 BC up to about 500 AD, when Roman Britain comes to an end.
So yeah, one of the things that I find extremely exciting about the Durotriges project is that year on year, we really are seeing, like in our lifetimes, like our understanding of the Iron Age and Dorset into pre-Roman times and during the Roman, like really expand.
Yeah, I mean, we were very keen to really try and fill in detail, because if you look at any history book of prehistoric Britain or Roman Britain, the Durotriges are always mentioned. And the reason that they're mentioned is, in theory, they put up this great, valiant resistance against the Romans. So they're always cited as being barricaded up in their hill forts. The Romans attack, and there is this battle of attrition whereby the Second Legion assaults every single hill fort, conquers him, because the Roman army at that point is unbeatable in the field. The survivors are sort of rounded up, they're washed, they're shaved, they're shoved into Dorchester, they wear togas, they're meant to speak Latin, and that's the end of the story. And it's a nice, well, it's not particularly nice, but it's this very simple black and white story.
Sure.
And we know that through history, there's never as clear cut as that. When a country is invaded by another, there are many who resist, there are many who passively resist, there are many who accept the conquest, and we wanted to look just using archaeology to get a much better idea. And really what we've been discovering disproves the standard conquest and assimilation model that is always put forward, and it's giving us a better understanding of how the Durotriges lived, the nature of their houses, their sort of cultural repertoire, what they're making, and the kind of artifacts that they were wearing, the kind of things that they did in life, none of which are recorded in the historical record.
Yeah. And I mean, it's been quite a big year. I mean, I think it's been quite a big year. Maybe this has been a normal year for you guys. For example, you guys had the paper out on matrolocality. Has that been in the works for a while?
It has. So essentially, Lara Cassidy at Trinity College Dublin did the bulk of the sort of DNA analysis, and Dan Bradley there as well. But Martin Smith, myself, Paul Cheetham, Gabrielle Delbar, and others at Bournemouth University, we've also been inputting into that. It's essentially the skeletons that we've been recovering from our dig. There's nowhere else really in the British Isles where the quantity of burials come up. What the other Iron Age communities are doing in Britain with their dead, we don't really know. But they don't seem to be burying them in cemeteries that we would recognise. They might be cremating their dead, they might be exposing them so that the body decays, they might be throwing them in rivers or lakes, because we know they put a lot of swords and weapons and artefacts in those kind of wet places. But we just don't get the skeletal evidence. And without sounding really morbid, it's the skeletons that we find as archaeologists really, really important, because the history of our lives is written in our bone. What we eat, what our dietary choices are, injuries sustained in life, all these diseases and so on, some of them are traced in the bone. And also, with regards to these particular individuals, how they died. All that information is in there, as well as their DNA. We can look at the mobility isotopes and try and work out where they came from as well, to see whether there's been evidence of long distance migration. So all that physical data is coming from the bone. It's supplementing, it's improving on what we know from written sources. But we've really got a great sort of database, because we had a number of cemeteries. And again, I don't want this to sound really weird or morbid, but we love the cemeteries. I mean, a lot of the skeletons that we've been investigating they're in agricultural land. The plough is hitting them on a regular basis. So these bodies, if we leave them where they are, they will disappear in the next 10 to 20 years. So we're, in a sense, we are rescuing them from the ground. We get the opportunity to study them, and in the end, they'll get reinterred somewhere close to where they were originally buried. But in the meantime, it's studying the information contained in the bone. And Lara and Dan have done a fantastic job of processing that data, looking at the DNA of the skeletons that we've excavated, and we're looking at them sort of contextually. We're managing to sort of identify, from the bits that we've been digging, at least 5 different generations of people who are living on this land. So you can identify, who's the child of whom. We can identify sort of marriage partners. We can identify descendants. We've got creating a family tree of people who lived in this one particular area, and we're hoping to expand that to look at other skeletons that have been excavated across Dorset over the last couple of hundred years, which again all Iron Age in date. So it's the DNA. It's also looking at the mobility isotopes, essentially sort of identifying, you can identify the geological source in kind of the water that people are drinking when they're taking on board when they're really, really young. You can process that through the teeth, through the enamel. Yeah. But it's essentially, we are combining the DNA, the mobility isotopes, together with the artifacts that are buried with these individuals. And it's looking increasingly like what we're seeing with regards to the Durotriges is that there's a very strong matrifocal line in that it's the women who are buried with artifacts, who are accumulating goods in life. If you're talking about wealth being stored with grave goods, then it's essentially 99% of grave goods are with women, not the men. And it's the women who seem to be, we can identify family trees, we can identify the same sort of maternal line going through all these different generations. Whereas the males who we're recovering are coming from different geologies, different parts of the landscape, and don't seem to be staying there very long. Obviously, a lot of them have died there and have been buried there. But there's a very distinct line between the women and the men. So it does look increasingly like it's a matrilineal line. Land is being held by the women, artifacts, possessions by the women. The men have got a less significant role in land ownership and land control. What that actually means for society is something obviously we're still trying to look at. It might be that we're looking at men who are coming from different landscapes. They might be protecting the borders. They might be protecting the farmsteads. They might be having more sort of perhaps warrior-based society. That seems to be a strong message that we're getting in a lot of Roman sources. We want to be very careful how we use the Roman sources. But it's certainly a very clear distinction between men and women in the Durotriges, and that's what's coming out through the skeletons, and that's what's coming out through the DNA.
Yeah, and I mean, this is huge. I mean, the fact that with prehistoric Britain, we have this vacuum of at least written sources until the Romans arrive and like you say, some things that we sort of have to squint at and be like, not sure about that. And so to actually find this out, like from the archaeology, this is a huge leap.
And exactly, and what I particularly love, and this is sort of a personal perspective, when you often, if you ever sort of Google, other search engines are available, the Durotriges, you get pictures pretty much always that they are sort of muscular warriors fighting Romans, all looking very angry, all very tattooed. So you get the sense that the Durotriges are essentially a warrior society. The archaeology is sort of telling us that that's not the case. They're not that well organised politically. They're not, they're quite a scattered series of communities. There's a very strong matrifocal line. And I think, the archaeology is helping to subvert those very sort of machismo images, that sort of sense of warriors, of male-dominated society. And we know from the Roman writers, again, with provisos, but people like Julius Caesar talks about the Britons being odd because they're egalitarian. Men and women can rule.
Heavens forfend.
I know. The Romans don't get that. The Romans are one of the most patriarchal societies in the world. Yeah. They, for them, men are everything. Women don't own property. They don't own businesses. They're either owned by their husbands or their fathers. So the Romans think the Britons are deeply weird because men and women do things equally. They view that as barbaric. The Romans have evolved beyond that. They've become more civilized. So, Julius Caesar describes that and says this is weird, and probably most Romans reading his writing would go, yeah, that is weird. But to us, we think, actually, the British society seems much fairer. I mean, it's not perfectly fair, but it seems much more open, much more sort of equal in what the sexes can actually do and what they are doing.
Yeah. Now, if we could go back a little bit in the timeline, I mean, one of the reasons I'm really excited to have you on, I've been actually at time of recording, I'm just cutting together this sort of longer form episode. We started this series, for those who haven't seen those, kind of doing a bit of a speed run around Dorset, trying to get to as many Durotrigian sites as we could in a day.
You got a lot in. I was quite impressed.
I think our final score was 18. We got a little bit of footage at each, but I had to sort of cut in it because you can never film enough if you're doing a day like that. Anyway, so I was trying to have an episode where I gave a bit more nuance, and there are a lot of things I was like, oh man, I'm going to really struggle to characterize this accurately, which is why I'm glad to have you in to do a lot better job at this. When it comes to, so around about 100 BC, we have this horizon where we start seeing hill forts and just generally the use of the landscape change. We see these big defended hill forts suddenly kind of start to go out of use in a lot of places. What do we know about this change?
There is a big event horizon. Something happens at about 100 BC, you're right. It's hill forts across southern Britain seem to, well, archaeologically speaking, suddenly disappear. It's part of a long process. Ramparts start collapsing, ditches are no longer cleaned out, houses start decaying, settlement moves elsewhere. So the social systems that brought Hillforts into being have changed. We don't understand enough the mechanics of that, because obviously a lot of the archaeological and historical evidence we get deals with the later Iron Age, where you've got kings and queens and more organised societies that the Romans were called. But Hillforts, in their basic sense, they are defended, but we can think of them as kind of proto-towns, in the sense that you've got storage facilities, you've got elite settlement, you've got manufacturing areas, you've got a wide range of people. You look at Maiden Castle, about 300 BC near Dorchester, and you've got street plans, and you can sort of recognise different grades of building. It looks like, to all intents and purposes, a town. We don't know who's created that or who's living in there, but by 100 BC, that's all disappearing. It suggests a very significant change in society. It might be that society is controlled less by a few significant people who've got private armies and got the resources. It might suggest that people are no longer at each other's throats, or it's a more secure landscape to live in. We don't really understand, but certainly 100 BC and sites like Maiden Castle are coming to an end. But there's still big settlements in Dorset. So what we've been trying to understand is what's going on. We've dug a series of, they're described as banjo enclosures, which is a term I really, really hate, because it conjures up this kind of image of some kind of musical site where everyone's strumming away.
Well, it makes everyone sound like yokels. You just got these like Iron Age, like, yeah, there, son.
Yeah,
you shouldn't have come around here.
It's very sort of deliverance. It's very that sort of sense of people are playing banjos but it's basically a series of ditches, a narrow sort of entranceway that expands into a big circular ditch behind it. So all intents and purposes from the air, it looks a bit like a banjo that's been rolled over by a steamroller or something, something flattened. But these are big elite settlements. They're not as big as Hillforts, but they're the same date as Hillforts. They are also disappearing about 100 BC. So It's a wide range of settlement types are disappearing at the end of the Iron Age, and they're being replaced by something we don't really quite understand. It's more open settlements. There's more sort of smaller farmsteads. You get a sense that the landscape is more evenly distributed with farming communities, rather than having a few sort of Hillforts, these big prominent defended enclosures. There's a lot more sort of the landscape's progressively studded with farmsteads. So something is happening about 100 BC. We still don't fully understand what, but we can see the archaeological evidence for this change in settlement types.
Yeah, because it's kind of this reverse process, isn't it? From what I was reading, around the sort of early Iron Age, you kind of see the opposite thing happen, where suddenly the archaeology in the surrounding countryside around some of these big sites like Cadbury or Maiden, suddenly these smaller, like what had been in the Bronze Age, these little farmsteads, go quiet, and all the activity seems to be focused in the central area.
It is. It's like the Hillforts are hoovering up all the sort of surrounding settlements.
Yeah.
So you do get perhaps an idea of slightly more stratified society, a more sort of big person society, where somebody, a group of people, is organising the construction of this site, and people are gathering to them. And so the beginning of the Iron Age, we got this process sort of starting, but by the end, of course, those Hillforts are coming to an end. So it is a very strange social process, because of course the temptation is to think that the Hillforts are still here when the Romans arrive.
Yeah.
And then they're attacked. I think when we look at Dorset and look at Maiden Castle, Hod Hill, Hambledon Hill, they would have probably looked to the Romans much as they do to us. These are abandoned sites, grass-covered ramparts. There may be a few people living inside, which of course there aren't now, but they aren't state-of-the-art battle fortresses which the Romans have to attack.
Yeah.
So I think that's the issue. It's quite clear that Hillforts die out long before the Romans arrive, but we still don't quite understand why.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned in the previous episode, this is something, I'm embarrassed that I came to this quite late, but when I picked up on that, like, I think a lot of people, as you described at the beginning, imagine, like waves of legionaries crashing against the wooden palisade walls, and it turns out that's, like, really quite unlikely based on what we know now.
It is. I mean, it's a great, emotive, dramatic story, and people love that from the past. We don't. at schools, I don't think they sort of teach enough about sort of medieval history. So you get the Tudors and you get the Stuarts and you get sort of Queen Victoria, but you miss out on all the castle building medieval monarchs. But when kids do hear about that and they visit the castles, it is that sense of drama and battles and fighting. So I think a lot of people have grown up with the story that the Second Legion arrived and attacked Hillforts, and it is a dramatic story and it is very emotive. It's just not supported by the archaeological evidence at all. So, as far as I say, as far as we can tell, the Hillforts had died out a long time before. There may have been fighting at them, but I suspect it would have been small scale. If you've got 5,500 legionaries plus about 5,000 auxiliaries turning up outside the Hillfort, you're living inside it in a small farmstead. There's about 3 of you. There's your parents. You've got some kids and a dog. There's no way you're going to fight that. You're just going to say hello.
Yeah.
We're happy to see you. So there might have been small scale skirmishing, but there are no large standing armies defending Hillforts at the time the Romans arrive.
Yeah, and this would transform our understanding of 43 AD, because if, for example, so the Duropolis site, if that's not defended, or at least not defended in the same sense that, these big banks and ditches elsewhere, that would have really altered the calculus of how they would come up against a Roman force coming through.
Yes, yeah, the area we've been digging, we use the term Duropolis to sort of describe our Iron Age settlement. I kind of wish we hadn't now, because it makes it just sound like Atlantis or some kind of lost civilization. But it's a sort of a name that we've given for all the Iron Age settlements that we've got. But essentially, in the very late Iron Age, the Duropolis, the Durotrigian settlement towns, they are small scale. Some of them have got little ditches around that main house. Most of them aren't. The big phase we looked at, there were sort of quite a large number of roundhouses, but they didn't have any kind of enclosure around them, so they're open, undefended. And I think really when the Romans arrived, the reason it takes the Roman army so long to really conquer Dorset, Devon, Cornwall, these are sort of modern terms, but obviously they stand so you can understand them geographically, is that they've got no one to fight. Basically, in the south and east, in Kent and Sussex and Essex, you have got very large tribes like the Trinovantes in Essex, the Catavalorni in Hertfordshire, the Cantiaci in Kent. These are tribes that are coming together. They've got a self-awareness, self-identity. They've got rulers, people who are using the word rex for king or indeed for queen on coins. There's a great deal of political organisation there. The Romans find that kind of society great because they've got a big capital. The Romans can either attack it or threaten it or make friends with it and make friends with the leadership. That tribe's conquered. When they get to Dorset and you've got thousands of farmsteads, no individual leaders, no town.
And you have to sort of pretty much deal with each one, even if there's not a big resistance, you've got to sort of sort them out one at a time.
The question is, do you knock at every farmstead and say, hello, we're the Romans?
Here's a pamphlet.
Yeah, you may not have heard of us, but
Have you heard about that? We'd like to give you the good news of...
Exactly, yeah. We're here to stay, by the way, so there's nothing you can do about it.
Hello, neighbour.
But, there's nothing... The Romans like nothing better than a large army they can meet in battle and they can just slaughter, and then conquest is done. Or a town they can lay siege to and attack. They haven't got that in Dorset, so it just takes... I think we've identified their main fortress just outside Wimborne Minster, Lake Farm. You'll see it as you sort of drive past Wimborne. It's that big area just between the Minster and the road. That's where their legionary fortress was from about 44 to about sort of 49, 50 AD. They're based there. And I think the reason they're there for so long is not because they're fighting individual hill forts and big armies. It's just because they've stopped. They're waiting for orders back from Rome. Do we go further west or do we just accept what we've got? Because west is weird. There's small farmsteads, no organisation. What do we do? And eventually the order comes through, advance, and they do. They can move down to Exeter and then up into South Wales. But they never fully conquer Wales. Arguably, they never really take Western Devon, and certainly not Cornwall. It's just because it doesn't fit their model of the kind of society that should be conquered, that can be civilised.
Yeah. And so it's... circling back to this change, so we've got a sort of largely undefended countryside. And again, I know there's so many open questions about this as we sort of see the transition from early, mid, and then the late Iron Age. Is it wise, for example, to view these in like in terms of violence? Because again, you can't escape the idea that, you know, in the early Iron Age, suddenly we've got big defences, and then seemingly in the late, we have, you know, like you say, these undefended areas. But is that the right lens to look at this? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the trouble is a lot of people look at hill forts in the same way they look at a medieval castle. And with a medieval castle, there is an organised army coming at you. I mean, there's going to be knights and there's going to be sort of peasants who are armed as well. But essentially, you've got a large force most of whom are quite well armed.
And it's a career fight.
It's a professional fighting force. And that's the same with the Romans. But when Iron Age hill forts first are created in the early Iron Age, or late Bronze Age, early Iron Age, they are not designed to fight against a large professional army because those things don't exist.
Yeah.
But they're over-the-top bits of engineering that look intimidating, and you think there's nothing else like it. If you've got a society that's taken a hill and has landscaped it and changed it and modified it, and they've built ramparts and they've got these intimidating gateways, it's like nothing on earth anyone else would have seen. You think, I'm going nowhere near that. Yeah. I'm either going to go there as a friend or as an enemy. I'm going to stay a long way away.
I mean, it's pretty. We have quite a lack of episodes of violence that we know about archaeologically in the Iron Age.
There are lots of individual episodes of it. I mean, I don't want the Iron Age to sound like it's some kind of amazing utopia whereby everyone loves one another and everything's fine. There are significant evidence of violence. I mean, essentially, if you think of the leaders then, these aren't necessarily democratically elected leaders. These are people who've got to the top because they're probably ruthless, they're cunning, they're violent. They've got people who support them. If you think of like sort of a mafia boss, that's what probably a lot of the Iron Age leaders are like. They're controlling trade and so on. And if you're on their side, brilliant. But it's a kind of parasitical relationship between them and the people. You know, they both need each other to survive. But I think once you've got the wherewithal to create a hill fort, you can then store food resources in it. If people are paying you tax, they can go in it. But you're living in this kind of citadel that no one else is going to argue with or come against. And your people, your supporters, can live in there quite happily as well. You've got no water supply, which is a bit of a downer. Yeah. But essentially, you're in a well-protected space and no one's going to get at you. Now, within the context of hill forts, you do find quite a lot of evidence of people who've died violently. There might be sacrifices, there might be people who've died in single combat, they might have been executed. But you do at Danebury, at Barry Cunliffe, excavated there were quite a few individuals who've got massive cranial trauma. These are people who've been put to death violently. We don't know enough about them to say whether they were outsiders, prisoners of war who've been captured, or whether they are servants or slaves, enslaved population who've been sacrificed. But there's significant evidence of violence, but we're not finding mass graves resulting from battles, because those big kind of battles don't exist. Again, I hesitate to keep going back to the Roman sources, but Roman and Greeks often talk about when they first encounter barbarian groups, they find it odd because these groups, not only are they quite mobile, but they like to get things resolved by single combat. Basically, if our group's got a problem with your group, we'll send a champion, you send a champion, they fight, whoever wins, argument's resolved.
Yeah.
And to us, I mean, that sounds a bit more civilised than fielding two armies of thousands of people who will just annihilate one another in the field to sort out the argument. So I think Iron Age society, there's a lot of skirmishing going on. There's probably a lot of raiding of cattle. There's lots of kind of competition and intimidation. But we're not seeing the large, big warfare that the Mediterranean world is experiencing at that time.
Yeah, and it's almost inconceivable that you'd have like a siege of a hill fort, for example. Like, that's just not happening, is it?
No. I mean, what are you besieging with? You know,
yeah.
In the Iron Age, they haven't got catapults or siege engines. They haven't got any of the kind of siege technology that the Romans have got.
Chariots are no good, so...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, chariots are great, impressive, intimidating things, but you can't charge a chariot at a hill fort and hope to get in that way. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think, hill fort as a statement in the landscape is impressive, but we mustn't think of them like a Roman fortress or a medieval castle that's there to protect the population from a mass siege. I think its very presence would stop anyone going anywhere near it.
Sure. It's interesting, just as you're saying this, it strikes me that it serves the elite maybe a bit more than it serves the population in some ways.
And that might be why hill forts die out, because the elite's changing. The way that society's organised is changing. And people feel that what is the point of living on a hill fort?
Yeah.
you are reasonably well protected, but what are you protected from? Is it more a sense of you're being imprisoned within this space rather than actually sort of living your life out in the area? And if there isn't that kind of enemy coming towards you, then better to be living out in the landscape where you've got a good water supply, where you've got better contact trade-wise, where you're not controlled by some sort of madman with a private army. You know, it might be what we're really just seeing is that level of society is changing, and then the settlements reflect that.
Yeah. Now, again, talking about this sort of new settlement type, and I was wondering if you could kind of help define this for us, because I've always found this a bit difficult. We have this word from Caesar. We have this term oppidum.
Yeah.
And from what I've gathered, they're these sort of large, they're notable for being quite large in sort of British culture, but they're not exactly like urban settlements we'd maybe see elsewhere in the ancient world. Could you just try and define oppidum for us?
Yeah, I mean, oppidum, I'm probably the worst person to do this because I hate that term. There's a lot, archaeologists like to classify things. I'm as bad as anyone else, but often the classification doesn't fit what it is you're trying to classify.
So is it not a very helpful term?
It's not a very helpful term.
Okay.
It's not helpful because the fact it's a term that Julius Caesar, I mean, other Romans probably used it, but Julius Caesar popularises it. He uses the term oppidum, or oppida for plural, to describe any native settlement that basically he's attacking. So it's not a town, it's not a polis in the Greek sense, it's not a civitas, it's not a sort of a Roman city.
Right.
So an oppidum is a native barbarian place, which by implication is going to be more sort of less civilized, more barbaric, generally more unpleasant.
But it's very unspecific then.
It's really unspecific.
Okay.
He uses it to describe sort of large hill forts, big sort of low plains type towns, any kind of settlement, any case where there are people gathered together is an oppidum.
Right.
So from that point of view, it's not a very helpful term.
Okay.
Today, archaeologists on the continent use it quite helpfully to describe basically what is a large Iron Age or Celtic or sort of pre-Roman township that has got effectively a town wall, it's got street planning, it's got levels of organisation inside, which is not that dissimilar from a Mediterranean-style town. It might be that the barbarian population, or I keep using the term barbarian, not in a sort of derogatory sense, but the non-Roman population are trading with the Mediterranean, and they're taking on board aspects of sort of urban planning and urban sort of structure. So that on the continent makes sense. British archaeologists, really since the 1930s, 40s, have used the term oppidum in a rather sort of more lazy way. Today, we sometimes use the term territorial oppidum. It basically just means it's a series of banks and ditches that define a political centre. So if we think of Colchester's a really good example there, Camulodunum, as the Iron Age population called it, because we get on the coins CAMU, the beginning of that name, they're using Latin on their coins. But it's a named place that's got a series of banks and ditches, predominantly on the western side of it, so it's protecting a settlement area from attack from the west, from immediate neighbours. They're probably the Catavalorni tribe in that direction. But these are very late Iron Age political places where there is a leadership who are identifying themselves on coins using Latin terms like rex for king. They are using Latin to name the place. It's where they're trading with the Roman Empire, they're gathering resources together, but they're not defending themselves like a hill fort. It's not a complete circular or complete hill that's being enclosed.
Sure.
It's basically, if you think of an oppidum as a kind of boundaries, as some kind of frontier system, which is protecting it's like an early warning system. It's protecting your area from chariots, from raiders, from whatever, and it's defining it, saying this is us, this is where our boundary starts. So it's really an oppidum in the context of Britain. It's not a hill fort and it's not a town, it's somewhere between the two, and it's suggesting the beginnings of some kind of great political organisation where you've got a leadership and they're trading with the rest of the world.
Okay. Yeah, so it's... Because, I gathered the walls, they're not complete. They're somewhat porous.
Yeah, I mean, the ones around Colchester are interesting. You've got these big linear strips, and someone has suggested that they were designed to stop chariots. We know the elite Britons are really sort of hopelessly addicted to chariots because they're fast-moving, they're intimidating, they're great for raiding and for skirmishing. These kind of barriers stops a chariot from getting through.
Right, okay.
It doesn't stop if you're sort of infantry or sort of warriors on foot necessarily, but it's a way of stopping, if you think like a sort of a minefield, stopping sort of tanks or something. There's that kind of defensive structure.
Yeah.
But most of them are discontinuous. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so the interior of them as well. Am I right in thinking that? Because I was thinking of the Chichester entrenchments, for example. I mean, like you say, they kind of mark out what's like quite a huge area.
They do, but effectively they are sort of between a series of rivers, and they seem to be designed to protect the harbour area, Chichester Harbour, which is a sort of big natural sort of harbour zone, and certainly around Selsey Bill, from anyone coming from the north.
Right.
So they don't help if you're coming by sea, obviously. If the Romans are coming, it's not a great defence against them. But it's a way of sort of limiting our territory and saying everything to the south of this is us, is our tribal, is our political heartland, and anything to the north isn't. So think of them more as sort of territorial boundaries rather than an enclosed space.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Okay, now taking a bit of a pivot, I wanted to talk to you about because this year you also had a paper out about Mortimer Wheeler's war cemetery. I keep forgetting when we're in audio, people can't see me do air quotes, but
I can see them.
Yeah. So could you just unpack a bit like some of the findings of that, because it's quite a major sort of reassessment of it.
Yeah, the war cemetery at Maiden Castle is arguably one of the most sort of iconic, after Sutton Hoo, it's probably one of the most iconic archaeological discoveries in Britain, because it was essentially, it's the east gate of the Hillfort. Obviously, Maiden Castle is one of the largest Hillforts in the country. It's certainly very impressive earthwork. The Wheelers, that's Mortimer Wheeler and his wife Tessa Verney Wheeler, or sort of very much the power couple of the 1930s. They've described them as the sort of the mother and father of British archaeology. In a way, they really were, because Tessa Verney was a fantastic archaeologist. She did most of the day-to-day planning and sort of recording and organising of the team, but she hated the public-facing lecturing and presentation of results. Mortimer Wheeler, her husband, is an ex-army officer, but he's very much into organisation and planning and presenting the results. So when it comes to the movie reel things, you've got some great 1930s sort of films done at Maiden Castle, at St Albans, where they dug as well. Wheeler's always there in his +4s, usually with sort of a cigarette holder and a sort of a cap, looking very much to the country gent, but explaining the archaeology, because he loves that. He loves the interpretation, and together they worked beautifully, as a team. But they were very much into this idea of digging up people, identifying historical events, trying to put names to places and events and so on. And one of the reasons that they both went to Maiden Castle was hoping to find evidence of a Roman attack, because the presumption, and Wheeler says in his own excavation report, it would be unthinkable if the Romans hadn't attacked Maiden Castle, because he's sort of viewing it as a big state-of-the-art fortress. He's thinking in a military mind, if I was coming heading westwards from Sussex and Kent across to Dorset, you've got this great thing rearing up at you, the sevenfold ramparts of Maiden Castle. That's where I want to attack to really sort of show what we Romans are capable of. And as an artillery officer in the First World War, he also was keen to try and find evidence of some kind of catapult attack. And in excavating the Eastgate Cemetery in 1936, sadly, Tessa Verney died at the beginning of that year, so she wasn't involved in the main excavation there. It was all Wheeler's dig and Wheeler's interpretation. I think that also doesn't help the interpretation, because it's very much focused on the army and the military and the effects of war. But he found 53 burials in that gate. Quite a few of them had evidence of cranial trauma or sort of severe trauma to the shoulders. They died violently, often with somebody hitting them over the head with a sword. Overkill, striking them more times than is necessary to incapacitate or to kill somebody. So he viewed this as evidence of the Roman assault. And of course, in 1936, in the build-up to what became the Second World War, Britain and all the countries in Europe are fearful of attack. They're fearful of what a militaristic society can do against innocent civilians. So it very much chimed with the times. and it's very dramatic as well. I mean, Wheeler put forward this amazing story describing how the legions attacked, laying down a barrage of catapult bolts, setting fire to houses, then systematically working through the hill fort, slaughtering the men, women and children, and then as a halt call to the slaughter, the survivors creep out of their burnt hovels at night and bury the dead where they can. I mean, it's a dramatic bit of prose. You can imagine a journalist or a novelist writing this. And it becomes an embedded part of Dorset history and of British history. It's one of the first recorded historical events, apart from the fact that Wheeler didn't have radiocarbon dating to go with, so he was assuming they all died in one event. We've radiocarbon dated the bones now, and essentially the skeletons buried in that Eastgate cemetery are deposited over at least a 100-year period.
Right.
So it's not one siege.
Not even close.
I mean, it'll be longer than the siege of Troy if that was the case. So these are people who've died violently over a long period of time. Most of them are dying before the Romans get here. So what it seems likely is that, I mean, Neil Sharple's excavated in Maiden Castle in the mid-1980s. His excavations seem to show that Maiden Castle is going out of use at 100 BC, like every other hill fort across the country. It doesn't last until the Romans arrive in AD 43. So it's going out of use. There's small settlements going on inside it, but the East Gate is being used as a cemetery for people in the surrounding area to bury those individuals who've died violently. Now, it's highly likely they didn't die there. I mean, there's one or two that may have been executed and placed there, but these are people who might have been died in small-scale skirmishing. They might have died in single combat, but they've died violently. They've been placed in the East Gate, which might be seen as an ancestral, abandoned.
So it's like a particular necropolis there.
Yeah. I mean, also bear in mind, if you're burying your dead in the East Gate, you can't now use the East Gate.
Well, I was going to say, that's really very good evidence that the Hillfort is not operating, like you say, as a super fortress anymore.
It's like you have a football stadium and one entrance, you say, we're going to start use that gate as a cemetery now. You think, well, how are we going to get the supporters in and out? It no longer functions in that sense. So I think Maiden Castle's, I mean, it's still a dramatic place. It is to us as it would have been to them. But it's a place where the meanings have changed, and it's a place where they bury their dead. And Wheeler didn't have radiocarbon dating at the time and jumped to the natural assumption that they died in one single event. And so he was working with evidence that he got, but he created a story that, I mean, give him credit. It was a story that captured the public imagination.
Well, no kidding.
It generated interest. It generated funding. There was no funding for archaeology then. It went around the world. It did its job. But he defended that interpretation up until he died in the mid-1970s. And no one else was allowed to question it. And I think that means that it's remained a part. It's made part of the story of Dorset. It's made a part of the story of Britain until now. And now we can say that archaeology is disproving that theory. I think it's fair to say people don't like that because it's if you'd grown up. I grew up as a kid learning about the story of the Maiden Castle, believing it to be true, and when some dirty great big archaeologist tells you it's not true, it can seem upsetting, and I get that. But it's a case of a beautiful story killed by an ugly fact, and the ugly fact here is that those bodies weren't the residue of a Roman assault. So there's something else. And I think that's the interesting story. What's going on in the Iron Age? It's not a peaceful utopia. They are occasionally killing each other. They are people who have died violently. But what we're seeing is a place where those people are interred, rather than thinking sort of these ironclad psychopaths from the Roman Empire are coming in and systematically killing a peaceful rural population, which they might have been doing that elsewhere, but they're not doing it at Maiden Castle.
I mean, this is one of the things, I realised this the more I was kind of putting together the previous episode on Dorset and the Durotriges, that, I imagine the public doesn't really like it when you add more nuance, which in this case often just means just more unanswered questions.
It is. And also people don't like the sense of, we're saying that people like the idea that Dorset hill forts, they're built by the Durotriges, no, they're not. The Durotriges, Durotriges, as far as we can see, are coming in after the hill forts die out. They might be in part people who are migrating out of northern France to get away from the Romans. But they're using Maiden Castle to bury their dead. They're not living in Maiden Castle. So we need to sort of sort of uncouple the Durotriges and Hillforts. Their only association is as cemeteries in the late Iron Age.
And this is a big twist, because for the public, you can put that label, you can draw those maps, with the boundaries. You got the Dumnoni over in the west, and it's all very neat.
And it will never. I mean, you go on the internet now, you look at Wikipedia and other sort of things are available, but. It's all about the Battle of Maiden Castle. It's all about the Durotriges and Hillforts and conquest and war. That's such a deeply embedded story now. I don't think it'll ever go away, but we do have to be aware that that story is not supported by the archaeology.
Yeah, sure. And so, I don't think people... I suggested that people kind of prefer to have these things a bit like an Agatha Christie thing, where, you can come along and you can solve the history. Well done, guys, we solved it, wrap it up, we can go.
And the trouble with archaeology is, I mean, as a science, it's a science that is involves all the arts as well, but it never really gives you answers. And I get that people hate that. With Time Team, old archaeology program on Channel 4, you've got 3 days and they give you a result. But archaeology, that's really for the purposes of TV, and it works nicely in that format. But archaeology is not like that. It never really gives you answers. It just generates more questions.
Well, yeah.
And I think the whole point of archaeology is keep asking those questions, but also keep changing your ideas as the evidence changes.
Yeah.
You can't stubbornly stick to one idea, like Maiden Castle battle, and say, no, it's true. Because if archaeology challenges that, then you've got to think of a new idea.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give people the kind of sort of safety and security, because the stories keep changing and as the evidence keeps changing. But what I want to tell you now in 5 years' time might be disproved, and that's fine. That's what archaeology does. But at the moment, we're dealing with the current interpretation.
Well, I was just thinking that, we talked earlier about natural locality and all those things. I mean, this discovery has come after years of fieldwork from you guys. I mean, archaeology is also quite a slow process in some ways.
It's ridiculously slow, yeah. I mean, it's infuriating. I mean, I think again comes down to the fact that we don't have kind of big levels of funding. There's often money to pay for excavation as some kind of environmental analysis if it's going to be a big infrastructure project like a road or
Sure.
HS2 being built. I mean, whether or not HS2 ever gets finished is another question, but the archaeology has been conducted before development takes place. There's funding for that, but often there's not the kind of funding to do the scientific analysis of the material afterwards. And certainly the kind of work that we're doing, because it's a training dig, we don't have vast sums of money. So it's a really slow process. We're working on stuff that we dug 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Most other sciences, you find something, if there's discovery, it's out there in the press, it gets tested, but it's a really swift turnover. But with archaeology, no, it takes a long time. It's infuriating, but there you go.
It's incredible to have you guys out there doing this.
Thank you. It's fun to do.
Well, yeah. Just before we finish, just something slightly less momentous. Can we talk about Hillforts Wednesday?
Yes.
I don't know how far back you can remember this, because I mean I think I stumbled on this. It's maybe about 5 or 6 years ago now. I was just like, oh, okay, what's all this? Do you recall, how long have you been?
It was about 9 or 10 years ago. It was one of those things that, I mean, I kind of wish we'd given it a better name. If it'd been just Hillfort Wednesday or Hillfort or whatever.
It's always the problem is you forget the S. Oh, come on.
So it was just a hashtag because we were, I love Hillforts. I mean, who doesn't? They are amazing places to explore, to discover. Amazing visibility in the top. You get this impressive sort of sense of building and society. They're probably the most, other than Stonehenge or other stone circles, they're probably one of the most impressive archaeological features in the country.
Yeah.
So I love them for a whole variety of reasons. But we were doing geophysical surveys on Hillforts, and I wanted to just put it out. So we decided, why not Hillforts Wednesday? There are various other different days where we celebrate things. And it's been great because it's people, first of all, on Twitter in the sort of pre-X days, and on Blue Sky. I think it's also on Facebook and on Instagram as well. But it's a sense of celebrating these monuments. It doesn't have to be archaeologists doing it. It's people just visiting, taking photographs, putting up there, showing their love for Hillforts. And, Hillforts can be loved any day of the week, but Wednesday is the day that we sort of often come together to celebrate that online. So it's been great. And it's great for me to see photographs or images of sites that I'm not familiar with. Just to add to the list of things I need to visit in the future.
I mean, I think one of the things that's so wholesome about it, if we take the general public, who maybe have no ancient history knowledge, Hillforts might be a bit of a strange sell. It's Wait, where's the castle? You guys said we're going to Maiden Castle today. I'm just seeing this weird, like, grassy.
I have been up Maiden Castle many times where people go, "Where is the castle?" And you go, "Well, yeah, that's a bad name, but you're on it."
Yeah. But it's so nice that it's people going out for walks in the countryside. It's very much the whole thing of getting outdoors. It's something that hadn't occurred to me till recently, but of course, because with aerial photography and drones massively taking off, no pun intended, in the last decade or so, suddenly there's never been a better time to appreciate these things, because I think everyone's had the experience of trying to get a photograph at ground level of a hill. It's really hard.
It is, yeah.
To get it to sort of pop. And so now that we get to sort of see these from above, and you don't have to spend money on a light aircraft, it's like there's never been a better time, and it's pleasantly surprising to me, like, how many people are really into this. Like, it's not some tiny niche like thing in academia. Like, this is broad appeal across the public.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really democratised it, hasn't it, with it as a sense of being able to explore and identify and look at hill forts. But I think it's great. A lot of people love them, but a lot of people don't really necessarily understand them, and that's fine. As long as you're appreciating them.
Yeah.
But so many people do and take them to heart. I think again that comes back to why I think quite a few people have been upset about the Maiden Castle story, because they love Maiden Castle. But I think you can appreciate that site more without sort of the depiction of the Romans going in and killing everybody. It doesn't have to have a sudden ending to it. You can appreciate the earthworks more as a place where people lived rather than where they sort of died violently.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Miles, thank you so much for coming on. Now, even though, again, at time of writing, this seems a bit of a long way, next year you guys are going to be back out in the field, again near
Winterbourne, Kingston.
Yeah, that's the one. And people can come and see what you guys are up to.
Yes, I mean, essentially our dig, which we do every year, different areas, it's on private land, but we have a big public open day, and it's always the last Sunday in June. We advertise it a lot on social media, but yeah, if you look at Bournemouth University fieldwork pages, it would tell you about the open day. It will also tell you how to participate should you like to get your hands dirty and join in on the archaeological dig.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's something I'm hoping to do myself next year. I'm hoping to get out on the dig with you guys.
Please do. Yeah.
For a bit of time. Anyway, it's been so good to have you on and to be kind of like shining a bit of a light on this topic. So thank you so much. And all that's left to say is, if you've been enjoying the music in the background, that's ours. We create all the music for these episodes, and you can catch that on bandcamp.com. If you want to support the channel, that's the place to do it. I say, please come and find us on Blue Sky. You can check out hashtag Hillforts Wednesday. Do remember to add the S to Hillforts there. And otherwise, all the YouTube things, you can subscribe and like and smash the bell. And otherwise, we'll catch you very soon.